The question of whether Jesus of Nazareth actually rose from the dead has been debated for nearly 2,000 years. While this remains fundamentally a matter of faith for believers, historians and scholars have examined the available evidence to understand what can be known about this pivotal claim of Christianity. To explore this question objectively, we must examine the historical sources, archaeological evidence, and scholarly consensus about what happened in Jerusalem around 30 CE. Jesus of Nazareth lived in 1st century Palestine under Roman occupation. Most historians, regardless of their religious beliefs, agree that Jesus was a historical figure who was crucified under Pontius Pilate around 30 CE. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing around 116 CE, confirms that Christ was executed by Pontius Pilate during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. The Jewish historian Josephus also mentions Jesus' execution, though some parts of his account may have been later modified by Christian scribes. Crucifixion was a common form of Roman execution reserved for the worst criminals and political rebels. The process was designed to be both painful and public, serving as a deterrent to others who might challenge Roman authority. Historical records indicate that crucified victims typically died from asphyxiation, exhaustion, or shock, and their bodies were often left on crosses for days as a warning to others. The fact that Jesus died by crucifixion is accepted by virtually all historians who study the period. Within days of Jesus' crucifixion, his followers began proclaiming that he had risen from the dead. This claim was extraordinary and dangerous in the Roman world, where such proclamations could be seen as seditious. The earliest Christian writings, particularly the letters of Paul written in the 50s CE, contain what scholars believe are even earlier creedal statements about the resurrection that may date to within a few years of the alleged event. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, written around 55 CE, contains what many scholars consider the earliest written account of the resurrection claim. In this letter, Paul recounts what he says he received from others, stating that Christ died for sins, was buried, rose on the third day, and appeared to various individuals and groups. Paul claims to have personally encountered the risen Jesus, an experience that transformed him from a persecutor of Christians to their most prominent early advocate. The four Gospels, written between 70 and 100 CE, provide more detailed accounts of the resurrection story. While these were written decades after the events they describe, they claim to preserve earlier oral traditions and eyewitness accounts. The Gospel narratives describe women discovering an empty tomb, appearances of Jesus to various disciples, and physical interactions with the risen Christ. However, the Gospel accounts differ in certain details, leading to ongoing scholarly debate about their historical reliability. One of the most significant pieces of evidence cited by proponents of the resurrection is the dramatic transformation of Jesus' disciples. Historical records suggest that these followers, who had fled and hidden after Jesus' crucifixion, suddenly became bold proclaimers of his resurrection, willing to face persecution and death for their beliefs. The rapid spread of Christianity throughout the Roman Empire, despite official persecution, is seen by some as evidence that something extraordinary occurred to motivate such dramatic change. The role of women in the resurrection accounts has also drawn scholarly attention. In 1st century Jewish and Roman cultures, women's testimony was generally not considered legally valid. Critics argue that if the resurrection stories were fabricated, it would be unlikely that early Christians would have portrayed women as the primary witnesses to such a crucial event. This has led some historians to suggest that the prominence of women in the accounts may indicate authentic historical memory rather than later invention. Archaeological evidence provides limited direct support for the resurrection claims. While excavations in Jerusalem have uncovered 1st century tombs and crucifixion victims, no physical evidence has been found that directly confirms or refutes the resurrection narrative. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, traditionally believed to be the site of Jesus' burial and resurrection, contains structures that may date to the 1st century, but the identification of the exact location remains uncertain. The Jewish and Roman responses to early Christian claims have also been examined by historians. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions Jesus and early Christians, though he does not specifically address resurrection claims. Roman historians like Tacitus and Pliny the Younger describe the growth of Christianity and its beliefs, but they write decades after the alleged events. Notably, neither Jewish nor Roman sources from the 1st century provide alternative explanations for the empty tomb or the origins of resurrection beliefs, though this silence does not necessarily validate the Christian claims. Modern scholarship has produced various theories to explain the origins of resurrection beliefs without accepting their literal truth. Some scholars propose that the disciples experienced psychological phenomena such as grief hallucinations or religious visions that they interpreted as encounters with the risen Jesus. Others suggest that the resurrection narratives developed gradually through oral tradition and were influenced by contemporary religious ideas about divine figures conquering death. The swoon theory, popular in some circles, suggests that Jesus did not actually die on the cross, but merely lost consciousness and later revived in the tomb. However, this theory faces significant challenges from medical knowledge about crucifixion and the gospel accounts of Roman soldiers confirming Jesus' death. Most historians, regardless of their religious beliefs, reject the swoon theory as implausible given the historical evidence about Roman crucifixion practices. Another alternative explanation is that Jesus' body was moved or stolen, either by his disciples or by other parties. The Gospel of Matthew acknowledges that some contemporary Jews claimed the disciples had stolen the body, suggesting this was an early counter-narrative to resurrection claims. However, proponents of the resurrection argue that the disciples' subsequent willingness to die for their beliefs makes it unlikely they would have perpetrated such a deception. The question of Jesus' resurrection remains one of the most debated topics in historical scholarship. While the historical evidence provides important context and constraints for understanding early Christian claims, it cannot definitively prove or disprove the resurrection. The available sources come primarily from Christian authors who believed in the resurrection, creating challenges for objective historical analysis. Non-Christian sources from the period are limited and do not directly address the resurrection claims. Contemporary scholars continue to debate the historical evidence, with some arguing that the rapid spread of Christianity and the transformation of Jesus' followers suggest something extraordinary occurred, while others maintain that natural explanations can account for the origins of resurrection beliefs. The debate reflects broader questions about the relationship between historical methodology and religious claims, particularly when dealing with events that are described as supernatural or miraculous. Ultimately, the question of whether Jesus actually rose from the dead transcends pure historical inquiry and enters the realm of faith and personal belief. While historical evidence can inform our understanding of what early Christians believed and how those beliefs developed, it cannot provide the kind of empirical proof that would satisfy all skeptics or definitively validate all believers. The resurrection remains, as it has for 2 millennia, a matter of profound significance for billions of people worldwide, regardless of where one stands on the historical evidence. Thanks for watching. If you find this information useful, please give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos exploring historical questions and evidence.